Done.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is the weekly Conversations with God book group, and we are reading Conversations with God Book 3 by Neale Donald Walsch. And we are on chapter 7. And I don't know if I said I'm Nanette Kennedy. And Linda, how do you pronounce your last name?
Paquette.
Paquette. Linda Paquette is reading for us. I was thinking about that on my long drive home yesterday, not introducing you properly. So let's just go ahead and get started.
All right, folks. So we're on chapter 7. And this is Neale speaking. We've covered a lot here. Boy, we've really covered a lot. Can we make another shift? Are you ready to go on? Are you? Yes, I'm rolling now. I've finally gotten on a roll, and I want to ask you every question I've been waiting 3 years to ask. I'm okay with that. Go. Coolness. Okay. So I would like now to talk about another of the esoteric mysteries. Will you speak to me about reincarnation? Sure. Well, many religions say that reincarnation is a false doctrine, that we only get one life here, one chance. I know, that's not accurate. How can they be so wrong about something so important? How can they not know the truth about something so basic? Well, you must understand that humans have many fear-based religions whose teachings surround a doctrine of a God who is to be worshipped and feared. It is through fear that your entire Earth society reformed itself from the matriarchy into the patriarchy. It was through fear that the early priests got people to mend their wicked ways and heed the word of the Lord. It was through fear that churches gained and controlled their membership. One church even insisted that God would punish you if you did not go to church every Sunday. Not going to church was declared a sin. And not just any church. One had to attend a particular church. If you went to a church of a different denomination, that too was a sin. This was an attempt at control, pure and simple, using fear. The amazing thing is, it worked. Hell, it still works. Say, you're God, don't swear. Who was swearing? I was making a statement of fact. I said, hell, it still works. People will always believe in hell and in a God who would send them there as long as they believe that God is like man, ruthless, self-serving, unforgiving, and vengeful. In days past, most people could not imagine a God who might rise above all of that. So they accepted the teaching of many churches to fear the terrible vengeance of God, of the Lord. It was as if people couldn't trust themselves to be good, to act appropriately on their own, for their own built-in reasons. So they had to create a religion that taught the doctrine of an angry, retributive God in order to keep themselves in line. Now, the idea of reincarnation threw a monkey wrench into all of that. How so? What made that doctrine so threatening? Well, the church was proclaiming that you'd better be nice or else. Along came the reincarnationists saying, well, you'll have another chance after this and another after that and still more chances. So don't worry. Do the best you can. Don't become so paralyzed with fear that you can't budge. Promise yourself to do better and get on with it. Naturally, the early church couldn't hear of such a thing. So it did two things. First, it denounced the doctrine of reincarnation as heretical. Then it created the sacrament of confession. Confession could do for the churchgoer what reincarnation promised. That is, give him another chance. Okay, so then we had a setup where God would punish you for your sins unless you confess them. In that case, you would feel safe knowing that God had heard your confession and forgiven you. Yes. But there was a catch. This absolution could not come directly from God. It had to flow through the church, whose priests pronounced penances, which had to be performed. These were usually prayers which were required of the sinner. So now you had two reasons to keep up your membership. The church found confession to be a very good drawing card, so it soon declared it would be a sin not to go to confession. Everybody had to do it at least once a year, and if they didn't, God would have another reason to be angry. More and more rules, many of them arbitrary and capricious, began to be promulgated by the church, each rule having the power of God's eternal condemnation behind it, unless, of course, failure was confessed. Then the person was forgiven by God and condemnation avoided. But now there was another problem. People figured out that this must mean that they could do anything as long as they confessed it. The church was in a quandary. Fear had left the hearts of the people. Church attendance and membership dropped. People came to confess once a year, said their penances, and were absolved of their sins and went on with their lives. There was no question about it. A way had to be found to strike fear into the heart again. So purgatory was invented. Purgatory. Purgatory. This was described as a place something like hell, but not eternal. This new doctrine declared that God would make you suffer for your sins even if you confess them. Under the doctrine, a certain amount of suffering was decreed by God for each non-perfect soul, based on the number and types of sins committed. There were mortal sins and venial sins. Mortal sins could send you right to hell if not confessed before death. Once more, church attendance shot up, collections were up too, and especially contributions. For the doctrine of purgatory also included a way one could buy one's way out of suffering. I'm sorry? Well, according to the church's teachings, one could receive a special indulgence, but again, not directly from God, only from an official of the church. These special indulgences freed one from the suffering in purgatory, which they had earned with their sins, or at least part of it. So something like time off for good behavior. Yes, but of course these reprieves were granted to very few, generally those who made conspicuous contribution to the church. For a really huge sum, one could obtain plenary indulgence. This meant no time in purgatory at all. It was a non-stop ticket straight to heaven. This special favor from God was available for even fewer, royalty perhaps, and the super rich. The amount of money, jewels, and land given to the church in exchange for these plenary indulgences was enormous. But the exclusivity of all of this brought great frustration and resentment to the masses. No pun intended. The poorest peasant hasn't a hope of gaining a bishop's indulgence. And so the rank and file lost faith in the system, and attendance threatened to drop once again. And hang on, I just need to clear my throat.
You're on mute, Linda.
Sorry. So now what did they do? Well, they brought in the novena candles. People could come to the church and light a novena candle for the poor souls in purgatory. And by saying a novena, which is a series of prayers in a particular order that takes some time to complete, they could knock years off of the sentence of the dearly departed, extracting them from purgatory sooner than God would otherwise have allowed. They couldn't do anything for themselves, but at least they could pray mercy for the departed. Of course, it would be helpful if a coin or two were dropped through the slot for each candle. And a lot of little candles were flickering behind a lot of red glass, and a lot of pesos and pennies were being dropped into a lot of tin boxes in an attempt to get me to ease up on the suffering being inflicted on the souls in purgatory. Wow, this is unbelievable. And you mean people would not see right through all of that? People did not see it as the desperate attempt of a desperate church to keep its members desperate to do anything to protect themselves from this desperado they called God? You mean people actually bought this stuff? Quite literally. Well, no wonder the church declared reincarnation to be an untruth. Yes, yet then I created you. Yet when I created you, I did not create you so that you would live one lifetime, an infinitesimal period, really, given the age of the universe, make the mistakes you were inevitably going to make, and then hope for the best at the end. I've tried to imagine setting it up that way. I could never figure out what my purpose would be. You could never figure it out either. That's why you've had to keep saying things like, the Lord works in mysterious ways. His wonders to perform. But I don't work in mysterious ways. Everything I do has a reason, and it's perfectly clear. I've explained to you why I created you and the purpose of your life many times now during this trilogy. Reincarnation fits perfectly into that purpose, which is for me to create and experience who I am through you, lifetime after lifetime, and through the millions of other creatures of consciousness I have placed in the universe. Then there is life on other, of course there is. Do you really believe that you're alone in this giant universe? But that's another topic we'll get to later. You promise? I promise. So your purpose as a soul is to experience yourself as all of it. We are evolving. We are becoming. Becoming what? We do not know. We cannot know until we get there. But for us, the journey is the joy. And as soon as we get there, as soon as we create the next highest idea of who we are, we'll create a grander thought, a higher idea, and continue the joy forever. Are you with me here? Yes, and by this time I could almost repeat this verbatim. Good. So the point and the purpose of your life is to decide and to be who you really are. You're doing that every day with every action, with every thought, with every word. That's what you're doing. Now to the degree that you're pleased with that, pleased with who you are in your experience, to the degree you'll stick more or less with the creation, making only minor adjustments here and there to get it closer and closer to perfect. Paramahansa Yogananda is an example of a person who is very close to perfect as an outpicturing of what he thought of himself. He had a very clear idea about himself and about his relationship to me, and he used his life to outpicture that. He wanted to experience his idea about himself in his own reality, to know himself as that experientially. Babe Ruth did the same thing. He had a very clear picture about himself and his relationship to me, and he used his life to outpicture that, to know himself in his own experience. Not many people live at that level. Now, granted, the master and Babe had two entirely different ideas about themselves, yet they both played them out magnificently. They both also had different ideas about me, that's for sure, and were coming from different levels of consciousness about who I am. and about their true relationship to me. And those levels of consciousness were reflected in their thoughts, words, and actions. One was in a place of peace and serenity most of his life, and brought deep peace and serenity to others. The other was in a place of anxiousness, turmoil, and occasional anger, particularly when he couldn't get his way. And he brought turmoil to the lives of those around him. Both were good-hearted, however. There was never a softer touch than the babe. And the difference between the two is that one had virtually nothing in terms of physical acquisitions, but never wanted more than what he got, while the other had everything, but never really got what he really wanted. If that were the end of it for George Herman, I suppose we would all feel a little sad about that. But the soul of the embodied itself, as Babe Ruth, is far from finished with this process called evolution. It has had an opportunity to review the experiences it produced for itself, as well as the experiences it produced for others, and now gets to decide what next it would like to experience as it seeks to create and recreate itself in grander and grander versions. We'll drop our narrative regarding those two souls here, because both have already made their next choice regarding what they want to now experience. And in fact, both are now experiencing that. You mean both have already reincarnated into other bodies? Well, it would be a mistake to assume that reincarnating, returned to another physical body, was the only option open to them. Well, what are the other options? Well, in truth, whatever they want them to be. I've already explained here what occurs after you call death. Some souls feel that there is a lot more they would like to know, and so they find themselves going to school. Whereas other souls, what you call old souls, teach them. And what do they teach them? That they have nothing to learn. That they never had anything to learn. That all they ever had to do was remember. Remember who and what they really are. They are taught that the experiences of who they are is gained in the acting out of it, in the being it. They are reminded of this by having it gently shown to them. Other souls have already remembered this by the time they get to, or soon after they get to, the other side. I'm using language now which you are familiar, speaking in your vernacular, to keep as much as possible the words out of the way. These souls may seek the immediate joy of experiencing themselves as whatever they wish to be. They may select from the million, cajillion aspects of me and choose to experience that right then and there. Some may opt to return to physical form to do that. Any physical form? Any. Then it's true that souls could return as animals, that God could be a cow, that cows are really sacred. Holy cow. Oh, sorry. You've had a whole lifetime to do stand-up comedy. And by the way, looking at your life, you've done a pretty good job of it. Kaboom. That was a rim chop. If I had a cymbal here, I'd give you a cymbal crash. Thank you. But seriously, folks, the real answer to the question you are basically asking, can a soul return as an animal, is yes, of course. The real question is, would it? And the answer is probably not. Do animals have souls? Anyone who's ever stared into the eyes of an animal already knows the answer to that question. Then how do I know it's not my grandmother come back as my cat? The process we're discussing here is evolution, self-creation and evolution. And evolution proceeds one way, upward, ever upward. The soul's greatest desire is to experience higher and higher aspects of itself. And so it seeks to move upward, not downward on the evolutionary scale, until it experiences what has been called nirvana, total oneness with the all. That is, with me. But if the soul desires higher and higher experiences of itself, why wouldn't it ever even bother returning as a human being? Surely that can't be a step upward. If the soul returns to human form, it is always in an effort to further experience and thus further evolve. There are many levels of evolution observable and demonstrated in humans. One could come back for many lifetimes, many hundreds of lifetimes, and continue to evolve upward. Yet upward movement, the grandest desire of the soul, is not achieved with the return to a lower life form. Thus, such a return does not occur, not until the soul reaches ultimate union with all that is. Well, then that must mean that there are new souls coming into the system every day, taking lower life forms. No. Every soul that is ever created was created at once. We're all here now. But as I have explained before, when a soul, a part of me, reaches ultimate realization, it has the option to start over, to literally forget everything, so that it can remember it all over again and recreate itself anew once more. In this way, God continues to re-experience itself. Souls may also choose to recycle through a particular life, form at a particular level, as often as they like. Without reincarnation, without the ability to return into physical form, the soul would have to accomplish everything it seeks to accomplish within one lifetime, which is 1 billion times shorter than the blink of an eye on the cosmic clock. So yes, of course, reincarnation is a fact. It's real, it's purposeful, and it's perfect. Okay, but there's one thing I'm confused about. You said there's no such thing as time. All things are happening right now. Is that correct? It is. And then you implied, and in book 2, you went into depth on this, that we exist all the time on different levels or at various points in the space-time continuum. That's true. Okay, so now here's where it gets crazy. If one of those of the me's on the space-time continuum dies and then comes back here as another person, then who am I? I would have to be existing as two people at once. And if I kept on doing this through all eternity, which you say I do, then I'm being 100 people at once, 1,000, a million versions of 1,000,000 people at 1,000,000 points on the space-time continuum. Yes. I don't understand that. My mind can't grasp that. Well, actually, you've done quite well. It's a very advanced concept, and you've done pretty well with it. But if that's true, then I, the part of me that is immortal, must be evolving in 1 billion different ways, in 1 billion different forms, at 1 billion different points on the cosmic wheel in the eternal moment of now. Right again. That's exactly what I'm doing. No. I said that's what I must be doing. Right again. That's what I just said. No, I said, I know what you said. You said just what I said you said. The confusion here is that you still think that there's more than one of us here. There's not. There was never more than one of us here, ever. Are you just finding that out? You mean I've been talking to myself here? Yeah, something like that. You mean you're not God? No, that's not what I said. You mean you are God? That's what I said. But if you're God, and you're me, and I'm you, then I'm God. Thou art God, yes. That is correct. You grok it in fullness. But I'm not only God, I'm also everyone else? Yes. But does that mean that no one and nothing else exists but me? Have I not said, I and my Father are one? Yes, and have I not said, we are all one? Yes, but I didn't know that you meant literally. I thought you meant figuratively. I thought it was more of a philosophical statement, not a statement of fact. It is a statement of fact. We are all one. That is what is meant by whatever so ye do unto the least of these, ye do unto me. Do you understand now? Yes. Ah, at last. At long last. But, okay, you'll forgive me for arguing this, but when I'm with another, my spouse, for instance, or my children, it feels that I am separate from them, that they are other than me. Consciousness is a marvelous thing. It can be divided into 1,000 pieces, a million times a million. I have divided myself into an infinite number of pieces so that each piece of me can look back on itself and behold the wonder of who and what I am. Why do I have to go through this period of forgetfulness, of disbelief? I still not totally believing. I'm still hanging out in forgetfulness. Don't be so hard on yourself. That's a part of the process. It's okay that it's happening this way. Then why are you telling me all this now? Because you were starting to not have fun. Life is beginning not to be a joy anymore. You were starting to get so caught up in the process that you forgot it was just a process. And so you called out to me. You asked me to come to you, to help you understand, to show you the divine truth, to reveal to you the greatest secret, the secret you've kept from yourself, the secret of who you are. Now I have done so. Now once again, you have been caused to remember. Will it matter? Will it change how you act tomorrow? Will it cause you to see things differently tonight? Will you now heal the hurts of the wounded, quell the anxieties of the fearful, meet the needs of the impoverished, celebrate the magnificence of the accomplished, and see the vision of me everywhere? Will this latest remembrance of truth change your life and allow you to change the lives of others? Or will you return to forgetfulness, fall back into selfishness, revisit and reside again in the smallness of who you imagined yourself to be before this awakening? Which will it be?
Wow. That, thank you for reading, Linda. As usual, you did a wonderful job.
That chapter got to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks, Linda. I could feel your emotion.
Yep. And it's definitely a chapter that I'll be rereading. And I've read this before. It's not the first time, but it feels like it's the first time. Because I did forget, went back into my forgetfulness. Probably not as much as I used to, but it's a process. It's a process. It's a process. One of the things I was going to say about the very beginning of this chapter, when Neil asks God about the reincarnation, and I can't remember, and I was trying to look it up when you were reading, and it was getting me too distracted, so I quit looking it up. But there was a Council of Nicaea, and it was in like the 300 or 400 AD time period. And I really wanted to find this specific line that these bishops from the Catholic Church from all over the world, or, as much as they could do that then, from where they were gathered, state that one of the reasons they didn't want reincarnation to be something to be believed was for everything that God says here, but it also said it takes the power away from the church if you believe in reincarnation. And if you, so these bishops decided to go through what they had as a written document of the Bible and systematically went through, and this is the part I really wanted to find. They removed every reference to the term reincarnation from the Bible. And so they decided, sort of like when Vatican II decided that, okay, it's not a sin to eat meat on Friday. It's just this person-made, man-made power and control over.
It's like when King James edited the Bible. I mean, that's, people don't think about it, but the King James version of the Bible
means just that.
It's a politically edited version of the Bible.
Yep. I always thought that was kind of funny when somebody would say, well, the King James version says, I said, but it's a version of the Bible. Excuse me. Also, I don't know how many people on this call were raised in the Catholic Church, but I remember as a kid praying for all the suffering souls in purgatory. We would do the evening prayer before dinner, and before we would make the closing sign of the cross, we would all say, please pray for all the suffering souls in purgatory. And I think this chapter is really well laid out in, the confessional, purgatory, reincarnation. And the part where God didn't come down and forgive you, but a high person in the church would forgive you for your sins in confession. And one of the things I remember about my first holy confession was that I remember I had to really think up a lot of things. And I remember using a long list that my mother used to use for a grocery list. And instead of saying I hit my brother 20 times, I'd say, I hit my brother, hit my brother, hit my brother, Or I would say, I talk back to my mother, I talk back to my mother, I stomp my foot, whatever it was. And so I get into the confessional, I kneel on the kneeler, and I hear that the slider open. And I can't remember what the priest said, but he said something, and then I said, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. and I said, this is my first holy confession. And there was only this dim light down by my knees where the kneeler was. So I had to hold my list of sins down by this dim light. And I got through the list, and the priest didn't say anything. I thought, oh my God, I must be bound for hell. He didn't say anything. Then I heard much louder this time. Bless you, my child. How long has it been since your last confession? I was confessing while he was listening to the other person on the other side. It was a fiasco, but he was like, I got to do that again. But I remember thinking, if there was one up note for me as, a child Catholic, is if I'd done something really terrible, I could get it off my chest. Even if I didn't want to tell my mom, I could just get it off my chest. And I don't think I understood or anything about the clean slate, whatever. But I think does anybody else have anything to say? Because I've got some other things to say about other parts in the book.
I just reminded of my the discussion of reincarnation reminds me of what my grandmother always used to say. She always said she wanted to come back as a male dog because she felt like a male dog had the best life. They could screw around whenever they wanted, and they get petted, and they could sleep, and I just, that's just always struck with me. And as I got older, I did kind of wonder, what her life was like that would make her think that was, like the best thing to come back as. And then there right now on Facebook, there's a little thing going around that would lead one to believe that this little boy that died of cancer came back as a robin because he loved robins or red-breasted birds, because the bird in the video is not a robin. It's a red-breasted bird, though. And the story is that he loved them, and then he's just a little kid and he dies, and then the mother goes out and here's this red-breasted bird, and it comes and it lands right on her hand, and it's like looking at her like it's acting like it knows her. And of course, what everyone wants to believe is that this little boy has come back in this bird. But as God just said in this chapter, it doesn't work that way. So.
See, and, I guess we're all in a place where we can choose to believe, because I believe my mom said she would come back as a cardinal. And she said, so whenever you see a cardinal, just know that I'm nearby and I'm thinking of you. And I know people who think that their loved ones came back as a butterfly. Wayne Dyer tells a story about a friend of his that died, and the friend said he'd come back as a butterfly. And he said one day he was sitting there out in his patio or something, and this butterfly just was almost like bothering him. And he kept like shooing it away, and then it finally came down and landed right on his hand. And he said, hello, George, whatever, So I think too, like the process that God talks about, I think it's okay. I think it's okay to think that. And I don't know if I do know I've read things about people coming back as animals. One of the things they liked most is that every day was a brand new start. It's like every day, my dogs, for instance, think it's the first day they've ever seen a squirrel. So they get that same joy, that same thrill every single day. And it's like, I let them out and they both go nuts. And I'm like, hope springs eternal. It's, so there's a lot of things. I think if you think about coming back as an animal, I don't notice my dogs worrying. I don't notice my cats, wondering if this is the last day of their life. Um, and I do believe that the animals go to heaven or wherever it is we all go, to the other side.
And I think
Yes.
animals can be messengers. So not so much that, I think it makes sense what gets said in this chapter, that little boy didn't come back as that bird, but that little boy is communicating with that bird. That is communicating through that bird. And that guy's friend communicated through that butterfly. He isn't the butterfly. He didn't reincarnate and come back as the butterfly, I don't think. But he's in communication with that butterfly, and that butterfly is communicating to his friend. I think that energetically makes sense to me as a way to describe what's happening.
Yep. I think the way you just described it is really good. Let's see.
Well, in oneness and unity consciousness, then, there's a part of God in everything. So there is a part of that little boy in that bird, and a part of your mother in every cardinal. And if everything's happening all at the same time, then, it's so much more elaborate and divine than our finite human minds can, but that's why they say dream big and build your castles high with love and with clarity, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the fear that's, closed the innocent heart center down. As Matt Kahn would say, living in Willy Wonka land, you can understand completely why the innocence would shut the heart center down.
Yeah, that's another good point. The last few pages were incredible. And one of the things where Neil says, okay, but now here's where it gets crazy. If one of the me's on the space-time continuum dies, then comes back here as another person, then who am I? I would have to be existing as two people at once. And if I kept on doing this through all eternity, which you say I do, then I am being 100 people at once, 1,000, a million versions of a million people at a million points on the space-time continuum. And God says, yes. And Neil says, I don't understand that. My mind can't grasp it. And I put question mark there myself. And if somebody else wants to speak to this, okay, well, I'm confused because on the page before that, God says, Neil says this must mean there are new souls coming into the system every day, taking lower life forms. God says, no, every soul that was ever created was created at once. We are all here now. But as I have explained before, when a soul is part of me, reaches ultimate realization, it has an option to start over. Okay, and then what I just read is that we're all one, but do we all have individual souls?
Well, I think it's like what Deepak Chopra says, that we're all I'm in my own little universe and you're part of my universe now at this moment. And, cats have their own little universe. Everything's got its own little universe, right? And everything is a sacred tone in a universal field of shared presence.
Okay.
I also, this just muddies it up, but so for me, the spirit is the enlivened being of this form, and the soul is the collective experience of me throughout all lifetimes that I'm having. But I can't answer the logical question of, there didn't used to be 7 billion people. And so, I mean, if you imagine Neil and God having this conversation 100 years ago, I don't know how many billion people there were then, but there were fewer billion people than there are now. And yet, what he says here is that all was created at once. So I can't logically explain the numbers, but somehow I can say that I intuitively, internally understand the concept. And I can't put it into words. I can't explain it in any kind of a linear or logical way.
Well, because one thing it made me think of is, like, years ago, I think the title of the book was called The Fractured Soul. And it was talking about how to get your soul all back, so it's not fractured. I would really love to get Neil on this call to talk about this chapter in particular. And since next Sunday's Easter, by the way, happy Palm Sunday to those of you who anyway, I just think this would be a great chapter to say, we're having a hard time wrapping our heads around this. And he could probably talk the full hour without ever asking another question.
And he hasn't been on the book club in ages.
No, he hasn't been. And I think I will, after Easter, I will write him and say, would you come to the book club? And we specifically want to talk about chapter 7, book 3. Because the guy's written 30 books or something. He can't possibly remember each chapter. I'm a short story writer, and I can't even remember the titles of my short stories. It's like, I know it's about this little girl, and and I can't think of the title for the life of me. So I know I'm not the only person that does that. So he'd want to, give himself a week to a few days to read this. And like I said, I want to read this chapter again. And not only because, Linda, you got so choked up, but I want to read it so that I'm reading it and not listening to you get so choked up and thinking I missed something. And there's nothing wrong with getting choked up. It's absolutely a beautiful thing. So don't misunderstand that.
And while you're thinking out loud, I just want to remind you that if we're skipping book club, then I'm for Easter, then I'm also not here the following Sunday, because that's when I go to the Embodied Messenger workshop.
Right. And what will happen is I will get on the call and I will probably have forgotten, but you won't be there. So I'll think, oh yeah, but you and I are planning on getting together to have coffee that same weekend or lunch or whatever. I don't know how your schedule works. But, I'm getting to that point in my life that sticky notes are becoming my friend. It's like, I have a great idea. I go to write it down and I go, well, that's gone. But anyway, I just, and that last paragraph of the chapter, and when Neil says, then why are you telling me all this now? And God says, because you were starting not to have fun. Life was beginning not to be a joy anymore. You were starting to get so caught up in the process that you forgot it was just a process. And so you asked me to come to you, to help you understand, to show you the divine truth, to reveal to you the greatest secret, the secret you've kept from yourself, the secret of who you are. Now I have done so. Now, once again, you have been caused to remember. Will it matter? Will it change how you act tomorrow? Will it cause you to see things differently tonight? Will you now heal the hurts of the wounded, quell the anxieties of the fearful, meet the needs of the impoverished, celebrate the magnificence of the accomplished, and see the vision of me everywhere? Will this latest remembrance of truth change your life and allow you to change the lives of others? Or will you return to forgetfulness, fall back into selfishness, revisit and reside again in the smallness of who you imagine yourself to be before this awakening? Which will it be? And we haven't really brought politics in here in a while. But when I was reading that, I was thinking about this thing that's going on in Syria. And, you know, it was an atrocity what happened to those people with the sarin gas. And that's all I can say. I don't know that there's much more to say. You know, that we keep those souls, those parts of us, in our hearts, our prayers, our meditations. And I'm sure many of you probably saw the picture of the father that was holding his two dead twin children that were 9 months old. And it wasn't a picture, it was a video. And he was sobbing. And his friends were trying to take the children out of his arms so they could bury them. I mean, yeah.
Don't get distracted by the illusion. Remember, I mean, everything we just read, we're all one. We're the father, we're those children. We're the people who dropped the bombs, we're the people who did the gassing. There's no separation. And it's not about the illusion of the appearances. It's about the process. It's just about the process. So in this moment, it's what do each of us do with that information? I think that's really the message. It's you're God, you're God, you're God, you're God. What do we do with the information? And we know that it's all divine because it's all being done by us. So it requires, it's calling for us to get into this more evolved mindset, to look at it not at that very physical level of people dying, but to move into the evolved mindset of its energy. And in this case, it's the energy of lack of love. And so just coming into our hearts and becoming the expression of the divinity within us, that's how we solve those problems in that last paragraph page there that you just read.
And also, just my awareness in the last 5 years, like the movement towards compassion, and it's everywhere. And we just have to have so much compassion for humanity and where we're at this stage in our growth. We are very young.
That's very true. And It's funny you said that, Christine, because I was thinking about, you know, for those of us that are extremely empathic, it's like, how can you not feel for that part of us, even though illusion, like Course in Miracles talks about. But if I were to not react, then I can go into that dangerous place of la 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 la. Well, my world's just fine. La la la, and
as long as you're showing up as the best you can possibly be in any now moment, then that's enough. That is enough. And the Course in Miracles teaches that. Unity teaches that. Like, we are enough. And, we wouldn't be here now at this very, very sacred time on this sacred planet if we weren't here to shine our light. And I thank God that we are here to shine our light.
Hello?
The Syrian family that we adopted, and it took us 1.5 years to get that family here. They arrived on the 22nd of March. And
Wow.
yeah, but they had family here, and it's been shown that if they have people that they know here, like people came over from Vancouver to meet them at the airport, and the kids are going to start school after Easter weekend. They're already registered, but I think we just have to continue to plant the seeds of compassion. No matter what the appearance is.
And starting with self-compassion is
exactly
is where it has to start, because we can't love ourselves. We can't love others unless we're loving ourselves, and unless we're being compassionate first with ourselves, and then we can offer compassion. And I'm glad you used the word empathy, Nanette, because that was what I was going to reflect, is that as an empath, it's really important that we learn how to rein that in, because being empathetic is actually not what we came here to be. We didn't come here to feel other people's pain. We came here to be the expression of God's divinity and love. And we get mixed up with our compassion, and not with our compassion, with our empathy, because empathy it points the marker, it moves the marker from internal to external. And the relationship's really internal.
Right. Well, and I just want to add to what you're going to say, and then I think Anne wants to say something. But the flip side,
Hi. I can be heard. It took me so long to get on the call today because I had the wrong code, so I missed most of it. But the word that came up when you were talking is mercy. Compassion is one thing, but it took me a while to understand mercy, and especially mercy for myself. So you can look that up in the dictionary. But it really is something that is beautiful. And then the Course in Miracles, what came up was, it says it only has the meaning you attach to it. So if something happens and you don't attach meaning to it, it doesn't have meaning. It only has the meaning you attach to it. So everything will be divine. We really are, it's like we are these actors that created this play, and we've acted these parts so long that at a certain point we almost forgot that we're the writer. And maybe we just need to rewrite our lines.
Yes. And I agree with what you're saying. And Sarah just posited a question in the group chat. It always seems like when we're at the end, but I'm putting words into Sarah's mouth, but do people feel like maybe we should leave it open-ended for an additional half hour, and then if we run out of things to say, we can say goodbye? Or if we have that extra half hour, we can get deeper into the discussion. And if you don't want to stay
Well,
for
for
more
me,
than an
that
hour, you
would be
don't have
great since I missed most
We're-
of the calls today, but
right.
we could do some
Yeah,
reading. But that's
Yeah.
me.
Well, today we're not going to do it because we didn't plan it that way.
And I do have to
Sure.
go.
Yeah, and so let's do this. Next week is Easter. Happy Easter to everybody. We are not having a call next weekend.
Oh,
Um,
okay, thanks.
we will have a call the following
Uh,
weekend.
Nanette?
Yes.
When are you planning on
I just got
posting
back
the
into
book?
town at 10 o'clock last night, and I am going to start uploading them. My upload is much faster than the internet that my sister had. It was taking 2.5 hours, and if I left the page, it would stop the upload. And I couldn't be away. I could not have my computer for those long time periods. So I will be working on that today.
I
And this
also
one
wanted to
too.
bring,
I'm sorry, Shabana, what were you saying?
And this one too, I'd be very grateful if you could do it.
Oh, I will.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And then Ann, you were going to say?
but I also wanted to bring up the time of year being Easter, and I'm born again, but I'm Jewish too, and this is one of my favorite holidays, Passover, because the symbology of it is. So I wanted to mention that because that's basically kind of like when we say compassion, and we're not bound by anything. It's up to us to set ourselves free. It's kind of like, how do you put a break in that glass ceiling? So anyway, I just wanted to mention all the energies right now are so spectacular.
And Linda is the one that's recording this call, and she just messaged me that she needs to go. So if she goes, we all go.
Okay.
So
Okay.
love you guys, and we'll talk the week after.
Bye.
Okay. Love you.
Get it off.